So, welcome everyone, Zoe, and everyone watching this after the fact. My name is Taylor Helms, and I'm the Director of Operations, and I'm on the French horn, piano, and composition faculty for ZCUN's music. And we are so excited to host these clinics and tonight to welcome Atlanta Symphony Orchestra violist Lachlan McBane as our clinician today. Mr. McBane joined the viola section of the ASO in 1998 and has served as acting assistant principal during several ASO seasons. He is active in chamber music around Atlanta and is a faculty member at Franklin Pond Chamber Music, where he directs the Fall into Spring student chamber music program during the school year. A member of the American String Teachers Association, he has twice been an adjudicator for ASTA's national solo competition. He has also served on the faculty of the ASO's Talent Development Program. Lachlan is the founder and music director of Bravo Homeschool Strings, which offers string orchestra programs for Atlanta area homeschooled students. So for today's clinic, we'll stay on mute while Mr. McBane works through the GMEA High School 11 and 12 viola audition excerpt. I suggest you have a copy of your excerpt nearby and are taking notes as he works through it. And Zoe, if you have any questions, you can type them into the chat, or you can, since it's just us, you're welcome to unmute yourself. We'll have a little section for questions at the end when he's finished. Okay, and without further ado, I'll hand it off to you, Mr. McBane.
Great. Well, thanks for being here, and I'm going to attempt to help you play this all-state excerpt for this year to the best of your ability. So I want to go over a couple of things that are true for any audition that you're going to do, whether it's taped or live or whatever. The impression that you want to make is going to depend on several larger factors. One is, well, there are a couple, three, I guess I'd say, that would really just, if you get them right, you'll be in the upper group of auditionees at anything. And that is good rhythm, good intonation, and good tone quality. And if you don't do those things, you're not likely to do well. There's a fourth thing, which can kind of disqualify you from being among the upper group of auditionees for anything, and that is preparation. If you're not prepared, if you really don't know the music yet, that is going to be really obvious to anybody that's listening to any audition, but I'm not going to really talk about that much. And then the thing that will really put you over the top if you do the other things well is to play really musically. So I want to talk about some of those. This particular Mazas Etude, and we're number 12, as far as rhythm goes, there isn't much to it really. It's just 9/8 with groups of 3/8 notes pretty constantly. So there's not much to say about the rhythm for it other than being nice and steady is good. So I'm not going to waste much time on that. Practicing with a metronome is recommended always, at least some of the time. But there's not much else to say about the rhythm. So let's just move straight on to intonation. There are going to be two things that are going to help you play this excerpt. It's not an excerpt, it's an etude. Help you play this etude in tune, and you really have to master these two things to do this well. The first one is you have to establish each position that you're moving to accurately. And the second one is once you're in a certain position, you have to have the frame of your hand and the finger pattern accurate as well. So let's look at an example of that at the very beginning, where we have you can see right off the bat we're using basically a finger pattern that goes from open string up to first, second, third finger. And then there are other spots such as, let's see, I wrote this down and now I can't spot it in my notes. Well, oh, the last line of the first page. where we're dealing with a 1-4 frame for your hand and not really the open strings. So getting those properly set up is going to help a ton. Now, beyond that, you still have to listen to know whether you're in tune, and I can't say it enough times. The most important thing when you're learning anything or performing it is you've got to listen to what's coming out of the instrument. And so that will tell you even better sometimes than using a digital tuner or something else. That'll tell you whether you're in tune. If you're getting a good sound and it sounds right and the tone quality is good, then you're probably pretty close to in tune. If you're not quite in tune, the instrument doesn't ring and it just sounds not optimal, and that's your biggest clue. But I do recommend using a digital tuner. I use one on my phone with the needle that shows where you are. You want one that responds pretty quickly when you play so that you don't have to dwell on every note in order to know that you can just spot, like by the color or the fact that the needle's staying pretty steady, you can spot anything that's very far off. So that's the basics of playing it in tune, playing anything in tune for that matter, but this excerpt is particularly lined up to do that. When I teach this excerpt to students, I usually have them write in which position they're in for each measure. I don't mean you have to write one on each measure, but every time which position you're in changes, write it down so you know whether you're in first position, third position, second position, whatever. And it really only uses first, second, and third until the last two bars. So I learned to use Roman numerals for that. So I just write a Roman numeral 1 or 2 or 3 for where it changes. So first two bars are in first position. This next two bars are in third position. Then it's first position for quite a ways. Then it goes to third for 2 bars and back and so on. And there's only one place where it's really a little thornier, which is in the middle of the second page. It's the 46th measure, where we have E flat, D, and then C sharp. It goes down to half positions of it. That's the only place that doesn't go in nice blocks. But if you don't really know what position you're in and you're just sticking fingers on your fingerboard, again, it's not likely to be in tune. Now, the next factor is the sound, and that's kind of, there might be more to say about that. So we always want to get a good tone, but part of that also involves the articulation. And this etude should be played, well, it says the first note to be firmly accentuated or accented. That's true and important, but more important even, I think, is that you use a good marcato or martelé bow stroke on all the notes. Yes, the first one of each three is got a forzando on it, so it's extra strong. Not really an accent so much as just a deeper, little bit louder note. But the others need to have good articulation too, so it's not going to do you any good if you play like that. What we need is clarity on the second, third note as well. So this whole etude is entirely on the string, and all the short notes are made by biting the string, by setting it and pressing down with your index finger. And that's true everything in the whole etude. So you use that stroke to get the attack, But then the important thing is that you let each note release too, so that it rings nicely. And we don't want actual air or space between any of the notes. They keep going, but they don't go through a note strong all the way to the end of the note. At the end of each note, I'm still making a sound. It's a pure ringing kind of sound, not like that. So if you're doing those two things, you're off to a good start. Starting the note and then releasing it. And then we have, of course, down, up, up all the time, which gives us a bow distribution issue, where we need to use the right amount of bow on the down bow and then about half that much on the up bow. When you're learning this etude, you surely want to practice it slower than the GMEA would like 88 to the quarter, to the quarter note, which is pretty fast. But when you're learning it, to learn to play it in tune, you of course need to do it slower. You'd probably use more bow at the slower speed. At the really quick tempo that they want it, eventually you're going to need to shorten it up. As to where in the bow and how much, I would recommend using, let's see, at full speed, which is about so I'm using maybe half of the bow on the down bow and then half that much on each up bow, so that we keep arriving at the same place. Now if you're practicing it slow, which is the way that it should be done when you're learning it to make sure you're in tune, then more bow for that. And the other small thing I could say about the sound is, don't worry too much about your vibrato on this when you're playing it faster, because the notes go by really quick. You can just keep, if it was marked, I'd mark poco vibrato, a little bit of vibrato. But basically it's just keep your fingers alive. One wiggle on a note is probably going to be about enough. I'm not trying to go with a really intense vibrato. The ringing sound is much more important here. So those are the intonation and sound and articulation things. There's a couple little technical things that I wanted to mention that are not directly related to either of those. One of the harder places in this etude is in the middle of the second page, after the upward arpeggio. This little section that follows that has a lot of string crossings where you have to cross 2 strings worth, and that gets pretty difficult at the faster speed. It's not so hard at slow speed. But at fast speed, it's quite hard. So my tip for that is, well, of course, you have to know which string level you're going to, but don't overthink it. Just think about the note that you're crossing to, and don't think about exactly how far you're traveling to get there. In other words, think of the destination, not the what's the word I'm trying to think of? Think of the destination, not the trip to get there.
Yeah.
Right. So, for instance, in that measure at the end of the line in the middle of the second page, I need to cross 2 strings to get to this note. I'm really just thinking about that third finger D. I'm not thinking, oh, move my hand down 6 inches. I'm just thinking, how does it feel to be there when I'm already there? So I'm letting, once I've learned it, I'm letting the thought of the note itself kind of be what directs my muscles to get there. The other technical issue is the last 2 bars with this little arpeggio that goes up high and it goes up to 5th position. And there are 2 things I'd be sure to pay attention to with that, besides making sure you actually have the right pitches. One is when you're shifting up, if you're using this fingering that's in the book, you're in 3rd position starting on the 2nd note in that measure. And now you have to go up to 5th position. So how do you get there accurately? And the easy way is to practice it slowly and use your first finger to guide the shift. So my first finger's on G. When I get to the next note with my 3rd finger, my first finger should be in the spot of where B flat I just played was. So that's how you can get your whole hand into 5th position accurately, is that's what I'm thinking, and then of course you don't play that other first finger note, but I'm thinking it during the process of getting there. And the other thing for that last measure is be sure to keep that first finger down on B flat once you get up there. Keep 1 down, because you need it down in the last bar for, you definitely don't want to have to find it again. Always do it the efficient way. And that makes the final little grace notes on that final note, it makes it a piece of cake. You've already got everything down. So otherwise, I've seen people struggle greatly. They arrive there and they're like, oh, how do I find those fast? Well, you don't have to. You've already got them if you've kept the first finger down. There are a couple little edits that I would recommend that aren't very complicated. One is in the 1, 2, 3, measure 5 of this whole etude. For performance, I would not ever probably do 4th finger on that E flat, the 4th note. I would just use 1st position for that E flat. You could, for teaching purposes, for practice purposes, it's fine fingering to practice, but it's kind of iffy for performance, so I'd just do 1st finger on that one. In measure 9, one little change will make that a lot easier, where you have the 8 notes all on one up bow. If you just do the first 3 notes in that measure separate, down, up, down, and then 6 notes up bow, you'll get almost the same effect. At high speed, no one will even notice what you're doing. And it makes it a lot easier to fit in those 6 notes that way than going 1 long down bow and then 8. That's quite a lot harder. So make that little change, don't tell anybody, and it'll sound great. And then in the last couple lines of the etude, at least in the printed book, I don't know if I assume it's the same on the PDF excerpt. It should continue to just be down, up, up, down, up, up, down, up, up. It's not all of them are marked, so it kind of looks like maybe they mean it to be a mixed thing. But I think it's all down, up, up, down, up, up, down, up, up, until I recommend the next to last bar on that arpeggio figure doing all separate bows on that measure while you're doing the shifting stuff, except up, up on the last two notes of that measure. So the next to last bar goes. Then up, up here. So those are the best bowings to use in my personal opinion. Let's see. Is everybody writing this down? Good. Now, if you've got all of that and you want to sound awesome, you have to make it musical too. And there's two things to notice about this. I mean, it's not the most exciting piece in the world, but it's not meant to be. It's meant to learn various techniques. The first thing you need to do is notice that the whole thing basically comes in little 2-bar phrases most of the time, but then there are a few spots where it switches to 1 bar, 1 bar, 1 bar. So if you look at the beginning, for instance, you'll see it's really 2 bars at a time. And then the next 2 bars is a different harmony, and that's the next phrase. And so on. And it goes on like that for a while. You know, out of the first 8 bars, it's 2 plus 2 plus 2 plus 2. And then the 1 bar with the long up bow is its own thing. And then we start doing 2 again, 2, 2, 2. The places where it switches to 1 bar at a time are measure 18, where all of a sudden we're going, sorry, let me make sure I'm in the right key here. Then a different chord on the next bar. So it's 1 bar at a time there. So all of these places where there's 2 bars in a phrase, in general, it works nicely to do a decrescendo in the first bar and a crescendo on the second bar leading to the next 2 bars. So something like that. I don't know if the dynamics come across on Zoom at all, but it's essentially coming down at the end of the first bar and then going up into during the second bar into the third bar and repeat. The places where it's 1 bar at a time, it works really well to do strong at the beginning of the bar and decrescendo during the bar for each bar. So, for instance, because that's where the chord changes came if there was a piano accompaniment. And so we're kind of emphasizing that it's changing more often in the 1 bar phrases. So those are the basic things that I would recommend doing to give you you know, the rhythm, self-explanatory. Intonation, you've got to be conscious of the shifting in the frame of your hand and the finger pattern that you're in, whether you've got half steps, whole steps, whatever. The sound, you need the marcato stroke where it starts well and then decays a little and is pure ringing sound at the end of each note, but always clear, and using the right parts of the bow. And then musically, well, we just discussed what we can do musically with it. So I don't know, maybe I should take any questions now. Do you have any questions? Nobody has any questions. Okay, well, then I will play through it. I would recommend when practicing it, oh, yeah, I forgot to mention one other little helpful thing. When you are learning an etude like this, you want to save time whenever you can. You always want to save time when you're practicing and get things done with the least time and effort. So you don't always have to play all 3 notes of each 3-note group. If you're just learning the notes, you can just play And just leave off the third note of each group, except for the few measures where you actually have different notes on every note. So you need to play in that measure, for instance. Don't leave out any of those. But all the ones with two repeated notes on the second and third notes, when you're practicing it for the notes, just leave out the third note a lot. Now you have to make sure you know how to do the down, up, up bowing, but you can save a lot of time when you're focusing on the notes, the pitches, intonation, that stuff, by just leaving it out. So a great way to practice it for that is just, you could just do it smooth. If you can't do that, you're certainly not going to get all the notes faster speed while doing a more complicated bowing. So, all right, well, I guess I'm supposed to perform the whole thing now, correct? All right. And if anybody thinks of any questions, I can still answer them when I'm done. I'm not going anywhere. So they recommend 88. So I'm going to try to keep to that. However, a general good idea is to never play something for an audition faster than you can actually do it. So it's better to go a little slow and sound great than to go too fast and sound sloppy. That's just always true. They may ask you, can you please play it faster? Well, I mean, I guess they won't if it's a video audition. But still, you're going to come across always better doing it really well, a little slower, than going faster than you can handle. So if it's time to make your final video for this and you just can't play it at 88, then, you know, play it at something a little more moderate, like maybe 70 something, 76, 72, and sound great on it, and you'll make a good impression if you can do everything else. So, all right, I'll give it a try. This is actually my first Zoom performance. So, here we go. Thank you. So that's really exhausting at that speed. It's not not so bad if you take it 2/3 speed. But that brings to mind one more thing, which is don't injure yourself like trying to play it over and over. Take a break, stretch, come back to it in 2 or 3 minutes or 5 minutes or whatever. But if you play through things with all those string changes and stuff that fast, you're gonna be tired. And when you're tired is when injuries happen. So there's a concept in uh, I'm a big baseball fan, and in baseball that they watch pitchers pitch count so that they don't want them injuring their arms. Well, we can injure ours too. I've done it, and the uh, the what they really want to avoid in baseball isn't just the high number of pitches, but it's a high number of stressful pitches, like the bases are loaded, the best hitter on the other team is up, and those pitches where you're making max effort more than any others are where injuries happen for pitchers a lot, especially if they're already thrown 100 pitches. It's kind of the same for us. So that's kind of like high stress playing something with all those string crossings at a fast speed. Um, you know, take a few minutes off after doing that. But of course, you do 90% of your practicing at a slower speed. So if you can, I've found it's very true and helpful when I'm learning lots of orchestra music during the year. Um, when there's like a page of a zillion notes that are really hard and fast, the you've got to practice them slowly enough to get them in your brain and your fingers. But the thing that I've learned is if I can play it perfectly at about 75% speed, the jump up to 100 is mostly pretty successful. So if I don't have enough time to keep cranking up the metronome all the way to 100%, I just concentrate usually on making sure everything's absolutely perfect at a little bit lower speed, and then it goes okay generally. That last jump is actually easier as long as you know everything perfectly at the slower speed. So that's another technique I'd recommend for learning anything that has a bunch of notes. That's all I have to say, I think. Any questions now?
I think we're good. That I mean, you covered quite a lot. That was I,
Yeah,
yeah, that was great. I know I learned a lot. I don't even play viola. Like string instruments, just not my.
right. Good.
Yeah, that was really cool.
All right.
Um, Thank you so much. Yeah.
I
Thank
hope
you so much.
somebody else watches us.
Yeah, for sure. I'm sure they will. Um, and so good luck, Zoe, and to anybody else out there watching on your audition. And thank you so much, Mr. McBain. That was awesome.
My pleasure.
Yeah. So be on the lookout, Zoe, and everybody else watching this, for an email from us about like further, like other things, other opportunities happening. But if you think of any questions after the fact, like after we sign off and say goodnight, just email us and we can get you in touch with Mr. McBain for any kind of follow ups or anything like that.
Yeah, I'm happy to answer questions.
All right. Thank you so much. All right.
All
All right.
right.
Have a good night.
Hi, everyone.